Welcome to the talk with Erik Levine. My name is Leonhard Emmerling. I'm one of the curators of this show, and this talk will be in English. Erik's work, A Confession, is part of our show. It was one of the first works we had chosen. And a quick, brief introduction into Erik's biography. He's born in 1960 in LA, grew up in Los Angeles, and had quite a remarkable international career as a sculptor. Had a solo show at Lehnbach House, for example, in Munich. Had several exhibitions in prestigious institutions, and stopped working in sculpture in around 2000 and switched to video. And currently we have a show on in Aachen at the Ludwig Forum for Internationale Kunst, which is a kind of retrospective of his work of the last 15 years. And in his video work, in his moving image work, his focus is actually on masculinity, death, matters which he calls that they have a kind of urgency and a Dringlichkeit, life and death, Dringlichkeit, urgency. This is how you phrase it. And in his work here, Erik Levine's father got killed by a drive-by shooting, random shooting, apparently in LA. No, okay.
He was murdered. Deliberately.
Okay, he was murdered, but it's unclear.
It's unsolved.
And so it's unsolved, and one of the detectives dealing with that murder case asked him, do you want to have a look at that tape? And that tape shows a man entering an interrogation cell. The police officer gives him a bottle of water, leaves the cell, the man drinks, and after a while, he pulls out a gun and shoots himself. At the moment, in that very moment where he shoots himself, the screen goes black, so we don't see the actual event. And the second level of that work, which is equally relevant than the visual level, is the audio. There's a detective who speaks about what are the problems when you interrogate a suspect, when you have someone in front of you who of course denies that he's guilty, and she speaks about the body language. So you should at some point try to listen to the audio track of that work as well, because it's equally relevant. And she speaks, and that was my entry point of my understanding of that work. She says, you can't tell a lie backward. You can only tell the truth backward. All right? For whatever reason she says that, and whether she's right or wrong. And what Erik Levine does, he tells the story of that event from the end. From the point where he shoots himself to the point where he enters the cell. So in a way, he speaks, and it is called a confession, ein Geständnis. So in a way, Erik Levine says, the man was guilty. Is that true?
No. I can't say it's true. I think I show the event, and then we show it as it unfolds. So you see the end first, and then you see the narrative sequence of how it led up to the end, correct? But no, I don't implicitly think he's guilty. You and I just discussed earlier, why else would he kill himself if he wasn't? But it's not up for me to decide whether he's guilty or not. I think his action speaks for itself.
I had an argument with a visitor about that work, and he was under the impression that that work was staged, that it's not authentic. And when I said to him, no, it is authentic, it's found footage, he was really upset about it. And we had in many works of this exhibition, we try to discuss whether it's actually legitimate to show these works we show. Like, is Damien Hirst, can he actually do what he does? Yeah? Taking a picture of himself next to the head of a dead man. And I had this dispute with that visitor about whether it's actually legitimate that the detective gave you that work without the consent of that man. Of course he couldn't, but no family or whatever, nothing is known. So you received that work and you made a work out of it. Now we look at it and look at that man. What is your position about legitimacy or moral, more ethical legitimacy of artworks?
Ethical legitimacy. I don't know how I feel. I feel like so many things are in the public domain that an appropriation, where you take something in the public domain and transform it into a work of art, in a way I think is fair game. I've worked on pieces where I have had family members come up to me and ask me specifically not to do something, in which case I'll honor it. This wasn't the case. I didn't know the person. And for me, it's not so much what he's doing as the psychological kind of equation of first of all, what guilt is, how do we elicit a confession of guilt, and the whole psychology of how a detective goes about that. So that's my primary interest in this piece. It's not so much that he kills himself, but it's the psychology behind why he did it and how detectives in either an interrogation room or in a court of law can get somebody to elicit some kind of confession or some truth.
But what would you say if someone says, well, I don't think it's fair that this work is shown publicly? What would you then say, well, there's a kind of that's freedom of art, or?
The only way where I would feel compelled not to show this is if a family member asked me not to show it. Otherwise, this is from 15 years ago. I don't know the person. It's really not about him. And in the end, you don't see him kill himself. So, I mean, believe me, when I cut to black, it's gruesome. It's bad. And so that's not the point of what I was trying to say. So I don't feel like I'm using or abusing him because we don't know what actually happens. It could be an actor sitting there, you don't see him actually do it. So I'm more interested in the psychology behind the dynamic between a detective and a potentially guilty perpetrator.
What is you in the works we show in Aachen? There are other works like the killing in a slaughterhouse and or a long piece about a slaughterhouse. Then there's a piece about your father's murder, and he himself, I mean, he got killed, but he was himself a kind of weapon.
He was a hunter.
He was a hunter. He went on safari a couple of times in Africa. And so what is your interest in this? You call it matters of urgency. Why? Is there anything that drives you to this way? And you also you said that you prefer tackling things from the side instead of showing them directly. You in the slaughterhouse piece, there is no dead animal. So you have a certain way of dealing with the truth, right?
Or a truth, yeah. As an artist, I mean, all of us have to find meaning in our life, whether we're artists or in any profession. I mean, whether it's either to make a living, to support your families, or to exist, to feed yourself and to survive. But as an artist, really, I mean, I do it because I need to do it, and I believe that artists make work because there's in a search for meaning and in a search for a kind of real essence to what they do. I make the analogy sometimes, I love donuts. I don't know how would they say that in German. I say donuts. Yeah, beignets, but they have no nutritional value. I love eating them, they taste great. There's a lot of art in the world that I walk in and I immediately forget 2 minutes later, like a movie, a film, a work of art. For me, as an artist, I try to make a steak or a rindfleisch, yeah, a meat, where it's some sustenance, where it stays with you, where it gives you some sense of nutrition, and where it stays with you in a way, and so hopefully. And so with my work, I try to get, the reason I choose life and death scenarios and sense of urgency is because otherwise, for me personally, I'm not interested in making works of art unless they have some kind of substantial impact, however one defines impact, and obviously life and death is the ultimate impact. So that's often why my work revolves around themes and subject matter of life and death, because that's how I invest myself in what I want to make. That's what gives it meaning for me.
Can you speak a little bit about that how because you avoid actually showing the real thing? Yeah.
Okay.
And you use the word, you use the term truth in that context.
Well, I think what happens is that I try not to. I think it's really important, whether it's in a film or a work of art, that you thwart expectation. In other words, there's nothing worse for me than seeing a piece of theater, film, art, whatever it is, and knowing what's going to happen 10 minutes in because of the way things are sequentially set up. And so I think there's an element in the artistic experience that one has to create some kind of unexpected outcome. And for my work, when I immerse myself in specific areas, locations, environments, or events, I try to look at all of the information and activity around the specific act itself. And so I said in my interview, I felt like I could go into a university and make a work about education without ever putting my camera inside of a classroom, because there's so many things that happen in a university, so many interactions, so many activities that it's not only about the learning inside of a classroom, for example, or a restaurant. I could make a work about a restaurant and not having to go into the kitchen at all, showing how a chef cooks something. So again, it's just for me to be able to investigate and to discover. And that's how I take my camera in where I go, is to go around the events themselves and to learn and to seek and to focus on details, again, because I think it's very important to get to the general. We have to go through the specific, and sometimes to get to a specific thing, you have to isolate it from its surroundings, and so that's why I use a lot of close-ups in my work, is because that way it's not so contextualized within what you're seeing, but allows you to think about other ways of perhaps seeing it.